I've got some troubling news about England's royal family.
The Ascot procession had survived rain, protests, family fractures, and decades of royal upheaval. But nothing prepared the waiting crowds for the moment Princess Anne suddenly raised one gloved hand and ordered the carriages to stop. Her eyes were not fixed on the horses, the guards, or the road ahead. They were locked on Queen Camilla and on the unmistakable pearl choker resting against her neck, a jewel Anne believed had belonged to Diana. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Charles felt the change before anyone explained it. Royal Ascot, the annual racing gathering built around a royal carriage procession, depends on timing, order, and control. The king sat beside Camilla, while Anne followed within the line, with William and Catherine behind. Thousands watched from barriers, expecting elegance. Instead, they saw the monarchy freeze. Anne did not hesitate. The Princess Royal, a title given to the monarch's eldest daughter, knew royal jewels and the rules governing them. She recognized the multi-strand pearls at once. Her hand tightened against the carriage as she leaned toward the equerry, the royal aide responsible for ceremonial instructions. "That necklace does not proceed another yard," she said. The words cut through the calm. The led carriage slowed. Mounted guards stopped. Every vehicle stopped. Camilla lifted one hand to the choker, protecting it, and her expression hardened when she understood why. Charles turned toward her, but the queen consort refused to remove the pearls while the crowd stared. William saw them seconds later. The prince went completely still, and Catherine noticed the pain in his face before she understood what he was looking at. Diana's choker had not been kept with the ordinary royal collection. It had been stored separately, because its meaning went beyond ownership. It carried the memory of his mother, and wearing it required more than access to a locked case. That was why Anne's anger mattered. Someone had not simply selected the wrong jewel. Someone had crossed a protected family boundary and placed the result around Camilla's neck at one of the monarchy's public rituals. The future king said nothing, but his silence made the wound unmistakable. Charles finally issued a command. Both women were to be taken through a private entrance before the procession resumed. Anne refused to move until she learned who had approved the necklace. The horses shifted, whispers spread, and Camilla kept her hand on the pearls. The procession had stopped in front of the world, but the real collision was about to happen behind closed doors, where ceremony could no longer protect Camilla from Anne's questions. To the crowd, it was a necklace. To Anne, it was a boundary. To Camilla, it was a symbol of legitimacy. And to William, it carried the memory of a mother whose place inside the royal story had been argued over for decades. As the carriages were redirected away from public view, every person involved understood that the pearls had become something far more dangerous than jewelry. They had become a test of loyalty. Anne had spent most of her life protecting duty from emotion, but this was different. The Princess Royal, a title traditionally granted to the monarch's eldest daughter, understood that Diana's belongings were not ordinary pieces waiting to be reassigned. They remained tied to William and Harry because those objects carried the private memory of their mother as well as the public history of the crown. Camilla saw the matter through another wound. The queen had endured years of comparison, rejection, and silent judgment before reaching her place beside Charles. To her, wearing the choker was not theft. It was proof that she no longer had to stand outside the monarchy's past, apologizing forever for being the woman who survived Diana's shadow. William could not accept that meaning. In a private corridor near the Ascot entrance, he asked Catherine whether she had seen the necklace clearly. His voice stayed low, but his hands tightened around his gloves until the leather creased. The prince felt his mother's memory had been taken and used to strengthen someone else's royal image. Catherine moved closer and urged him to wait. The princess understood his pain, yet she also knew one angry confrontation could tear open the family at the very event meant to display discipline and unity. She reminded William that Camilla might have been given permission. He answered that permission from the wrong person changed nothing. Charles entered the side chamber carrying the weight of every role he held. The king found Camilla facing the window, while Anne stood beside the closed door. As monarch, he had to protect order. As husband, he had to defend the queen. As brother and father, he had to hear why both Anne and William felt betrayed. Camilla finally turned and insisted the choker had been placed among several Ascot selections. She said her staff assured her that authorization had been secured, but she refused to name who had given that assurance. Her silence sharpened the suspicion. Anne answered from personal knowledge. She had seen the storage notation herself. The choker was never meant to enter the general rotation, meaning the ordinary schedule through which royal jewels are selected for public use. Any appearance required direct consultation with William. Charles immediately demanded the jewelry register. An aide returned with the official record, then hesitated before admitting that the restriction had been altered only 48 hours earlier. The question was no longer whether Camilla should have worn the pearls. It was who had changed the record, and why the alteration had been made just before Ascot. The Ascot confrontation did not begin on the racecourse. It began 3 weeks earlier at a private dinner inside Clarence's house, when a locked jewelry case was opened after the final guest had left. Only a handful of people knew what happened in that room. One of them remained silent. Another made a promise that would later be denied. And Camilla walked away believing that Diana's pearls were finally within her reach. Camilla's staff had arranged the evening as a private jewelry review before Royal Ascot. Clarence's house, the royal residence used by Charles and the Queen, had hosted several similar selections before. Approved necklaces, heirlooms, and ceremonial pieces were brought from secure storage, so her clothing and official appearance could be coordinated without last-minute changes. One case did not belong there. Diana's pearl choker remained inside a separate velvet box carrying a restricted family designation, meaning it could not enter ordinary royal use without special consent. The piece was absent from the formal selection list. Yet after Camilla rejected the other necklaces, a senior jewelry curator placed that forbidden case directly before her. The moment of no return came on June 26th. Camilla opened the box, lifted the pearls, and asked, "Has the family objection finally been removed?" An aide standing beside the curator answered without hesitation, "The king will not oppose it." That sentence would later be preserved in a documented internal account of the dinner. Camilla held the choker against her neck and studied her reflection. Her expression softened, not with cruelty, but with the relief of someone who believed a locked door had finally opened. For years, Diana's legacy had remained the one part of royal history she could never touch without judgment. Now she thought the barrier had fallen. Charles heard about the necklace later that night. The king sat surrounded by state papers, official documents requiring the monarch's attention, when Camilla mentioned that the pearls had been offered for Ascot. Exhausted, he replied only that he did not want another jewelry dispute. She treated his refusal to argue as approval. He never realized his silence had been turned into permission. The next morning, the danger deepened. A handwritten restriction requiring William's consent disappeared from the digital jewelry schedule, the official record showing which pieces could be worn and under what conditions. In its place appeared a broader line, stating that the choker could be used at the sovereign's discretion. Anne had already worn them. Months earlier, the Princess Royal sent a written instruction after learning that Diana's personal pieces were being reviewed for wider use. Nothing tied emotionally to the late princess, she insisted, should be reassigned without consulting her sons. Now the aide who had promised that Charles would not object was waiting outside the Ascot chamber. Anne intended to question that person with Camilla present. What began with a quiet sentence beside a mirror was about to become a face-to-face reckoning, with no crowd, no music, and no ceremonial smile left to hide behind. The door closed, and the monarchy's polished public language vanished with it. Princess Anne stood opposite Queen Camilla, inside a narrow Ascot reception room, separated by only a table and years of unspoken resentment. Charles remained near the fireplace, while William waited outside. Then Anne looked directly at the pearls and delivered 4 words no one in that room expected to hear addressed to a queen. "Take the necklace off." Camilla did not move. Only 5 people stood inside the chamber: Anne, Charles, the Queen, a jewelry curator, and an equerry. An equerry is a royal aide trusted with ceremonial duties and private instructions. No senior advisors were present to soften the accusations, reshape the language, or protect anyone from the truth. Anne stepped closer. She told Camilla that the choker was not a neutral crown asset, meaning property held for royal use rather than ordinary personal ownership. Those pearls carried Diana's history. They could not be worn as decorative proof that the family's wounds had healed simply because time had passed. Camilla placed both hands against the table. She said she had worn the necklace believing Charles had approved it, and she would not be stripped of it like a guilty intruder. Her voice remained firm, but her fingers pressed hard against the wood. Humiliation was turning into defiance. Anne's fury sharpened. The Princess Royal told her that rank did not erase memory, and a crown did not grant permission to claim every symbol connected to the women who came before. Diana could not enter the room and object for herself. That, Anne said, made the family's duty greater, not smaller. Camilla finally broke. She asked how many rooms, jewels, ceremonies, and traditions must remain emotionally reserved for Diana forever. The Queen Consort's voice cracked as she admitted that, even after years beside Charles, the crown still felt borrowed whenever the family looked at her through the past. The curator lowered his eyes. Under Anne's questioning, he admitted that the restricted case had been brought to Clarence House after a verbal request from Camilla's private office. No written approval existed from Charles. None had come from William. The promise given at the dinner had exceeded every limit of authority. Charles turned toward his wife. The king stated clearly that he had never authorized the choker. His exhausted refusal to discuss another jewelry dispute had not been consent. Camilla stared at him as the truth settled. Someone had used his silence to give her permission he never granted. Her hands rose to the clasp, but she paused before removing the pearls. Camilla looked directly at Charles and asked whether he was defending royal procedure or choosing Diana's memory over his living wife. Charles could no longer stand between the two women in silence, because the next decision would reveal where power truly rested inside his family. Kings are rarely destroyed by the decisions they make in public. The dangerous choices happen in small rooms, when loyalty collides with authority and every answer wounds someone. Charles now faced one of those choices. If he defended Camilla, he risked alienating Anne and William. If he ordered the necklace removed, he would humiliate his wife. And if he delayed, the frozen Ascot procession would tell the world that the monarch had lost control. Charles knew the legal answer was not enough. The royal collection, the group of historic jewels and objects held for the monarch's official use, remained under his authority. Yet Diana's choker carried a family claim that ownership could not erase. It belonged to a grief still living inside her sons. Anne understood that difference better than anyone in the room. The Princess Royal held no greater constitutional power than Charles, but discipline had given her something nearly as strong: moral authority. She remembered old promises, guarded private boundaries, and rarely challenged the crown unless she believed the family itself was being betrayed. Charles withdrew into the adjoining study. The king removed his glasses, placed them beside the jewelry register, and stared at the altered entry without speaking. For several minutes, no one disturbed him. The silence was not weakness. It was the sound of a husband and a monarch fighting for control inside the same man. He remembered Camilla's long years of public hostility. She had endured insults, rejection, and the suspicion that every step forward came at Diana's expense. Yet allowing the pearls to remain would send William an equally brutal message, that his mother's memory could be reassigned whenever the crown found it convenient. Charles called William inside. The prince entered without anger in his voice, though pain shaped every word. He did not demand punishment for Camilla. He asked only whether Diana's belongings still belonged emotionally to her sons, or whether marriage to the king had erased that boundary. The question struck harder than accusation. William's restraint made the cost impossible to ignore. He was not trying to defeat the queen. He was asking his father to prove that dignity for one woman did not require taking memory from another. Anne delivered the final pressure. She told Charles that unless he ordered the choker removed and restored the original restriction, she would withdraw from the procession. The Princess Royal would not stand beside Camilla and pretend the choice had been acceptable. Charles returned to the chamber. The king ordered Camilla to remove Diana's pearl choker before the carriages resumed. He suspended the curator and demanded an immediate review of every change made to the jewelry register. Camilla obeyed, but instead of giving the pearls to Anne, she placed them directly into Charles's palm and said, "You have made your choice." The procession could now move again, but the silence left behind in that room would follow the family long after the horses returned to the road. When the Ascot carriages finally began moving, one detail exposed the damage more clearly than any official statement could. Camilla was no longer wearing the pearls. Minutes later, she was no longer in the lead carriage at all. Behind the closed doors of a private retiring room, the Queen sat alone while the procession continued without her. Anne had won the immediate confrontation, but victory brought no relief, only a deeper fracture, spreading through the family. Palace officials moved quickly. The carriage order, the fixed ceremonial arrangement deciding where each royal sits during the procession, was changed within minutes. Charles continued without Camilla because stopping the event completely would have turned a family crisis into a public collapse. Staff quietly explained that the Queen had withdrawn because of sudden discomfort. Silence became the palace strategy. Photographers were redirected. Broadcasters received no explanation, and every aide was warned not to mention the necklace. Anne personally watched as Diana's choker was sealed inside its velvet case and returned to secure custody. The Princess Royal had protected the boundary, yet the cost now felt heavier than the victory. Camilla sat alone in a retiring room. She removed one glove, then the other, placing both beside a cup of tea she never touched. An aide asked whether Charles should be called back. The Queen looked toward the closed door and answered, "He knows where I am." Humiliation hardened into anger. Camilla believed Anne had used the halted procession to prove that the king's sister could still overrule her. Worse, she felt Charles had allowed it. He had chosen order over comfort, Diana's memory over his wife's dignity, and the crown over the woman sitting alone. Anne felt no triumph. As the procession resumed, Catherine noticed the Princess Royal's hands trembling slightly. She had acted with certainty, but certainty did not erase pain. Anne knew the public would see only conflict, not the years of loyalty and grief behind her decision. The investigation soon widened. A documented review of Camilla's office communications showed that a staff member had not only requested the choker, the same person had asked for Diana's connection to be removed from the public jewelry briefing. The notes given to commentators explaining the history of royal pieces. William learned of the omission and immediately spoke to Charles. The prince did not demand that Camilla lose duties or face public disgrace. He wanted the necklace protected, the record corrected, and the manipulation acknowledged. Justice, he warned, must not become revenge. That evening, Anne received an unexpected message sent through Camilla's private secretary. The Queen requested a meeting with no Charles, no William, no advisors, and no security staff inside the room. For the first time since the procession stopped, the two women would meet without titles or witnesses, and what Camilla admitted would change Anne's understanding of the entire confrontation. There were no equerries standing behind them, no king to settle the argument, and no cameras waiting beyond the door. Camilla had asked Anne to meet as two women rather than as Queen and Princess Royal. The pearl choker was not in the room, yet its presence seemed to fill every silence. Then Camilla admitted something she had refused to say at Ascot. She had known the necklace would cause pain and wore it anyway. Camilla dismissed the last member of staff and waited until Anne closed the door herself. The two women met in a small sitting room at Windsor, the royal residence used for both family life and official duty. Without aides, titles, or prepared statements between them, neither could hide behind palace language. Camilla poured 2 drinks, but both glasses remained untouched. She told Anne that every conversation involving Charles quickly became a debate about protecting the crown. She wanted the truth heard before officials reduced everything to a mistake in procedure, a phrase clean enough to erase the human damage beneath it. Camilla looked directly at her and admitted the approval had never felt complete. She had sensed the hesitation, noticed the missing written consent, and understood that William had not been consulted. Yet she chose not to ask another question because she feared the answer would be no. The confession changed the room. Camilla explained that the choker represented more than beauty or rank. Wearing it at Ascot felt like proof that she had finally been accepted into every part of royal history, even the chapter that had once cast her as an outsider. For one brief moment, she believed the past had stopped rejecting her. Anne listened without interrupting. The Princess Royal finally answered that acceptance could not be taken from someone else's grief. William did not oppose Camilla's existence or her position beside Charles. He opposed seeing Diana's memory turned into evidence that another woman had finally won. Camilla then revealed a second truth through her private account of the Clarence House meeting. Her private secretary had encouraged the choice, arguing that once the necklace appeared publicly, opposition would become politically difficult. The pearls were not selected only as jewelry. They had become a test of how far the Queen's authority could reach. Camilla refused to hide behind that advice. She admitted the final decision had been hers. The Queen agreed to sign a permanent restriction preventing her office from requesting Diana's personal jewels again, with written consent required before any future review. Anne rose to leave, but Camilla stopped her with one final request. She did not ask to keep the necklace. She asked for the chance to return it personally to William. The confrontation had begun with Anne ordering Camilla to take the pearls off. It would turn only when Camilla found the courage to place them back into Diana's son's hands. By sunrise, the palace had lost control of the image. Millions had seen Anne's raised hand, the halted carriages, and Camilla returning without the pearl choker. No official statement could erase that sequence. Across Britain, the moment was interpreted as rebellion, protection, humiliation, and overdue accountability. But one newspaper front page transformed the confusion into a single devastating symbol: 2 photographs of Camilla, before and after, beneath 3 words: "The pearls vanish." Broadcasters replayed the interruption again and again. Commentators studied Anne's signal, Charles's expression, the changed carriage order, and Camilla's sudden disappearance from the public route. The procession was supposed to project stability. Instead, every repeated second exposed a family struggle the monarchy had failed to keep private. Buckingham Palace responded with caution. The institution, which serves as the monarch's main administrative headquarters, released a brief statement describing the delay as a private family matter involving the approved use of a historic jewelry piece. The wording confirmed that the necklace had caused the stoppage, yet revealed nothing about the argument behind closed doors. One front page captured everything. A major London newspaper printed 2 photographs side by side. Camilla, wearing the choker before the procession halted, then returning without it. Beneath them stood the headline, "The Pearls Vanish." By breakfast, that image had become the symbol of the crisis. Anne studied the newspaper in silence. The Princess Royal folded it with care and told an aide she had never intended to turn Diana's necklace into a national spectacle. Regret weighed on her, but doubt did not. She still believed stopping the procession had been necessary. Crowds gathered outside Buckingham Palace and divided almost immediately. Some applauded Anne for protecting Diana's memory. Others accused her of humiliating Camilla during one of Britain's most visible royal traditions. The Queen became either the victim of family cruelty or the author of her own disgrace, depending on who was speaking. An evening royal program then shifted the story. Citing a documented palace review, the broadcaster revealed that the jewelry register had been altered days before Ascot, and that the person responsible had been removed from duty. The crisis was no longer dismissed as a feud between two women. It now looked like a deliberate internal maneuver. William refused to let anger decide the public verdict. The prince authorized a statement respecting both his mother's legacy and Camilla's dignity as queen. His words protected Diana without encouraging a campaign against the woman married to Charles. Camilla chose action over another statement. Carrying the pearl choker inside its original velvet case, she traveled to meet William alone. No aide followed her through the door. The world had already delivered its judgment, but the only verdict that could truly close the wound belonged to the son of the woman whose pearls had stopped the royal procession. The final meeting did not end with another command, another public humiliation, or another royal decree. It ended with a velvet case, resting between Camilla and William on a quiet table. The necklace that had stopped Ascot had forced the family to confront a truth it had avoided for years. History could be inherited, but grief could not be reassigned. What happened next did not erase the past. It established the boundary that would finally allow everyone to move forward. Camilla entered without royal insignia and without a secretary. The Queen placed the unopened velvet case before William, making it clear that this was not a ceremonial exchange. It was personal. The prince understood that the choker carried more than value. It remained tied to Diana's life, her son's, and the promises attached to her memory. William spoke first. He made clear that he had never asked for his mother's presence to dominate every royal decision. He did not want the family trapped forever inside the pain of the past. But Diana's personal belongings could not be used to settle someone else's place in the monarchy. Camilla pushed the case toward him. "This should never have reached Ascot," she said. William opened it, touched the pearls for only a moment, then closed the lid. Silence followed. It was not hostile. It was the pause of two people finally understanding the damage without trying to escape it. Camilla apologized without condition. She admitted that she wore the choker, while knowing the approval remained uncertain. Her need to feel fully accepted had driven her across a boundary belonging to William and Harry. The Queen did not blame her staff, the curator, or Charles. She accepted the choice as her own. William accepted the apology. The prince told her he would not allow the incident to be used against her marriage, queenship, or public service. Accountability did not require cruelty. That answer ended the cycle of humiliation and gave Camilla a dignity defiance never could. Charles then restored the original restriction on Diana's personal jewels. The king ordered that any future use required written consent from her sons, and no private office could change those conditions through verbal approval. Anne later resumed duties beside Camilla. The Princess Royal did not apologize for stopping the procession, and the Queen no longer challenged the principle behind it. Their respect was restrained, but real. Anne's intervention had not been an attempt to overthrow Camilla. It was a declaration that becoming queen did not grant ownership over every emotional symbol of the women who came before. The monarchy emerged bruised but clearer. Diana's memory would be protected. Camilla's role would be respected. Charles would no longer permit silence to place them in competition. The Ascot procession resumed after only a few minutes, but the boundary drawn that day would endure for generations. Crowns may pass from one woman to another, but memory must never be worn without consent. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.